Greetings, parasite ecologists. In this video, I'll be talking about arthropods as vectors. In order to be a good vector, or a good host that actively infects the next host, usually by injection, you gotta be biting a bunch of hosts. Remember that micropredators are organisms that move from one host to the next. Micropredators are like predators. They use many different prey species over the course of their lifetimes, but unlike predators, they don't kill those prey. They're micropredators. They take little bites out of each prey individual that they feed on. The fact that they do that actually makes them really good at vectoring parasites, including filarial nematodes, as well as many bacterial, viral, and protozoal infections. Many biting arthropods serve as vectors. For example, the black-legged tick, which is an arthropod in the class Arachnida, vectors the bacterial parasite Borrelia burgdorferi, which causes Lyme disease. The house mosquito, an insect in the genus Culex, can vector lymphatic filariasis, or Wuchereria bancrofti, which is one of the filarial nematodes. And the kissing bug, Triatoma infestans, can carry American trypanosomiasis, or Trypanosoma cruzi, which is a protozoan parasite that we'll talk about when we get to the section on the protozoa. The thing that all of these parasites have in common is that they are transmitted by biting arthropods, which serve as the vectors. I want to zoom in on Lyme disease really briefly because it is the most common vector-borne infection in North America, and it's becoming more and more common every year. The ticks that vector Lyme disease have a really interesting life cycle. They start off as eggs that are laid in the spring, and then those eggs hatch into teeny tiny little tick larvae. They're almost too small to see. They tend not to use humans as hosts, but instead use small ground-dwelling mammals like white-footed mice, which also happen to be an extremely competent host for the Lyme disease bacterium. Mice are very good at replicating that Lyme disease bacterium inside of their bodies. So the larval ticks feed on these mice, and then they drop off and they do a little bit of development just in the leaf litter. Then they become nymphs, and those tick nymphs can now take another blood meal. They'll do that on birds or mammals, dogs, humans, whatever is around. And it's these nymphs that are responsible for the bulk of Lyme disease transmission to people, because when the tick larvae are born, they're uninfected by the Lyme disease bacterium. When they feed on the mice, they can become infected with Lyme disease. And then it's these infected nymphal ticks that transmit the Lyme disease bacterium to people. They're still small enough that their bite is often pretty hard to notice, but they're big enough to be loaded with Lyme. Once they take that nymphal blood meal, they can drop off to a little bit more development, and then they become adults. At that point, they are really big. Most people will catch an adult tick in the act of biting. And so adult ticks transmit very little Lyme disease to people because they're enormous. You're going to pick them off immediately. The nymphs are harder to see, so they can feed without you detecting them. That's why they're so dangerous with respect to Lyme disease transmission. The adult ticks feed mostly on deer. And then once they've taken that blood meal off a deer, they can drop off, lay their eggs, and the life cycle begins again. You can see why ticks make such good vectors for Lyme disease and many other parasites. They're taking many blood meals all throughout the course of their development. And they're taking those blood meals from a variety of different host species. They also tend to take their early blood meals from exactly those mammals that are most competent for a lot of different kinds of parasites, rodents. Lyme disease is of substantial interest because it has serious pathology for people. You wind up with lots of neurological symptoms, including overwhelming fatigue. When you initially get sick, you might have flu-like symptoms. The bullseye rash pattern is a classic symptom of early Lyme disease. For people who don't get their Lyme disease treated early, or who are very unlucky, you can wind up with long-term chronic symptoms of Lyme disease that can be really hard to treat, including a whole variety of neurological problems and chronic pain. The most disturbing thing about Lyme disease is the way that it's been changing in North America over the past couple of decades. I want to show you some data on Lyme disease cases. Lyme cases are reported at the county level to the Centers for Disease Control. So we actually have pretty good data on where it occurs across the country. And you can see in 2001, there was a lot of it on the eastern seaboard, a little bit in the Midwest, and just scattered pockets on the West Coast. Watch what happens as time passes. Major expansion in the area covered by Lyme, and an expansion in the number of cases of Lyme disease. Why do you think Lyme incidence is increasing in North America? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see you in the next video.